Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. This is our 2022 General Election Forum, sponsored by the Government Relations Committee of the Huron Chamber and Visitors Bureau. Want to welcome the District 22 House candidates that we have seated here at the head table, and also we have representatives here to talk about Constitutional Amendment D and Initiated Measure 27. I'm Mike Held. I chair the Government Relations Committee at the Chamber. I want to recognize the media that's here, the Plainsman and Performance Radio, and thank them for participating this morning. I would ask you to check your cell phones and please put them on silent or turn them off so we don't interrupt this morning's session. We'll start with the candidates and then we'll move to the ballot measures. Guidelines, just to remind everybody, first of all, both the candidates and the ballot measures, we do not intend this to be a debate. We intend this to be informational. So almost always we do not let the participants go back and forth. We let them respond to a question. We're here to have your questions and then have the participants respond to the questions. When we get to the question and answer part, if you would come to the podium and identify yourself and then ask your question, you can direct it to any of the three or later on the ballot measure participants, or you can ask it in general and we'll let them respond at their will. We also have cards. Dr. Craig Steinoff has cards and pens. If you would rather write your question down and send it up, we will handle your question that way if that's what your choice is. Each candidate will have 3 minutes in this forum for the House of Representatives for opening statement, and then 2 minutes for closing. We drew numbers and we will take them the way we drew the numbers for opening and then reverse the order for closing. Lori Shelton will be here as a timekeeper for the participants, and she will signal you when you have how much time remaining with a postcard so that you can see how you're doing on the time limits. With that, I want to welcome the 3 District 22 House candidates. On my right, Shane Milne. On my immediate left, Lynn Schneider, and next to him, Roger Chase. We will begin then with our opening statements, and we will start with Shane Milne. Shane, you need to turn your microphone on and then bring it up a little closer to you.
Perfect. Good morning. Thank you for being here this morning. Like Mike said, my name is Shane Milne. I grew up in a hard-working middle-class family. My father was a truck driver. I spent many hours in that rig. One of my favorite places in the world is to be in that rig. My mother worked various jobs within the school system, moving up from the kitchen all the way to teacher. My upbringing is probably a lot like yours. I learned the values of hard work, the importance of family, and how faith can shape our lives. I have a wonderful wife named Cheyenne, and together we have 4 amazing children, 2 boys and 2 girls. Some of you here know me from my role as a pastor. I have 10 years of pastoral experience, 3 of those being served in Huron. And like most pastors, I had to get a second job to make ends meet. Those 4 kids like to eat, right? So got to keep them flush with PB&J, right? So during my time as a pastor in Huron, I also taught ESL classes at Cornerstone's Career Learning Center. At a certain point, I was offered a position at the Salvation Army as a case manager for the Pathway of Hope program. And currently, I serve full-time as a case manager for RHD. I've been intentional in being very active within our community. I served a year on the Government Affairs Committee for the Chamber. It was a great learning experience. I was on a task force with community counseling to raise awareness of mental health services to our farming families, and I also currently serve on the board of the Heartland region of the United Way. I want to run for the State House because I feel like we need to bring back balance to Pierre. I believe when one party holds all the power for so long, we risk losing the will of the people. And I believe the strongest and loudest voice in our government should be your voice. It should be your voice, the voice of the voter. Time and time again, a majority of South Dakotans have voted in favor of a wide range of ballot measures. And time again, elected officials have ignored your voice. Even to the point where our own governor sued our state. If you elect me, I'll put your interests before myself. I'll put my interests before my party. Your voice should be the loudest in the government. I want to be your advocate in Pierre. Thank you again.
Thank you, Shane. Second, we will hear from Mr. Roger Chase. Roger?
Thank you, Mike, and good morning, everyone. My name is Roger Chase, and to let you know that in January, 2 of the 3 of us will be your representatives in Pierre in the state legislature. I've been in that legislature for the last 6 years and have enjoyed my time serving you in Pierre. During that time, I've served on the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee as well as Transportation Committee, which I think are 2 very important committees for District 22, and even the new District 22 being Beadle and Spink County at this time. I am married to Michelle, and I don't see Michelle here right now, but she'll probably be coming. 31 years we've been married together. We've got 3 grown adult children. Derek, who helps me on the farm each and every day, pretty much does the managerial and the day-to-day operations of the farm, which allows me to get away and serve you in Pierre. He is married to Tia, who is a PA at the Hearing Clinic. They have 2 wonderful children, Holden, who's 5, and Emmeline, who is 2. We have a daughter named Lexi, who's married to John Foss. They live in Vermillion. Lexi is a 3rd grade teacher at Alcester Hudson. John works for Polaris Operations Center in Vermillion, and they have a little daughter who's coming up on 2 next week named Hazel. And then we have a 3rd son, Ryan, who does work in Mitchell, works for Mitchell Christian High School, teaches Bible study and physical education, and in the spring he's going to be teaching speech and debate. I have been the owner of Coldwell Banker Action Realty. I've been a real estate broker in this community for 34 years, and pretty steady A. And then I've also own and operate and manage the farm that I grew up on. We have a diversified livestock operation and grain farm north of Huron. And like I said, my son takes care of the day-to-day operations, which allows me to come to town and work in town, as well as serve you in Pierre. I also have served as a county commissioner from 2001 to 2008 from Beadle County, which gave me a great experience in learning what is important to counties and the stresses that they are faced with on a day-to-day situation. I've also been involved with a lot of different community groups and organizations. I was the chair of community counseling for 4 years. I served on that board for 8 years. I've also been involved with Huron Housing and Redevelopment since 1996, and I currently serve as the chair of the board for the Huron Housing and Redevelopment Authority. Look forward to your questions today. Would like to continue to serve you in Pierre as your District 22 legislator.
Thank you, Roger, and we will hear from Mr. Lynn Schneider next. Lynn?
Well, thank you, Mike, and can everybody hear me all right? Am I coming through good enough? Okay. Well, good morning, and good to see a nice crowd out here, and I appreciate the Chamber Intergovernmental Affairs Committee for hosting and sponsoring this event this morning. I am just finishing my first term in the legislature, the House of Representatives, 2 years, and so I'm asking to be reelected to return. We accomplished some very good things for District 22, including the funding for the next building on the state fairgrounds that is well underway now. We also passed a very important bill to help the railroad with upgrading their line west of Fort Pierre out to Phillip, which was very, very important to that railroad, and that railroad is quite an anchor here for Huron with their roundhouse and their locomotive maintenance and repair shop. And there were also several other things that we've accomplished that have been very good for District 22. Like Roger said, our new district now is no longer Kingsbury County, officially at the end of this year, but now Spink County and a little sliver of Southwest Clark as well. So we're looking forward to representing all of those constituents. I'm a lifelong native of Beetle County, so is my wife. We've been married 53 years, and we've spent all of my career here in Huron, except a couple of years in the Army and a couple of years in Mitchell early on. My career was in agricultural finance and community banking. In many of those years, I was the CEO and led a good-sized employee group of around 125 employees, and as we expanded the bank and various other South Dakota communities. We have 3 grown sons who all live in South Dakota. 2 families are in Brookings, 1 is in Brandon. There's 8 super neat grandchildren from 9 years old to 22, so it's exciting to see that they are able to be productive South Dakota citizens contributing to our state, and that they've chosen to continue to live in South Dakota. I also have been serving on the House Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee, which is almost kind of a natural with my agricultural background, and then also on the House Commerce and Energy Committee, which is another very interesting committee. A lot of things come through there, Department of Revenue, Insurance Division, and various things like that. So that's been very challenging and exciting, and we've been able to also do good things there for District 22. So that's kind of my thumbnail background, and appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Lynn. So we are ready for questions. You can ask a question by coming to the podium and asking a question, or if you'd rather write your question down and send it up, raise your hand, and Dr. Steinoff will get you a card to write your question down. Who would like to be the first person to ask a question this morning? Anybody want to ask? Okay, here we have a volunteer. Please identify yourself. I'm going to just say that we do not accept speeches from the questioners. We would like you to get to your question, direct it to one or all 3 of them, but we want to hear from the candidates. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Held. Peggy Gibson, former South Dakota State Representative for 8 years. My questions are, why are both of you on the same committee in the legislature? That seems like an overkill to me. That's question number 1. Question number 2, what bills have each of you personally sponsored and gotten passed? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was directed over here to the incumbents, so we'll let them start.
Thank you for the question. We both serve on the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee because that's what District 22 is. The old District 22, and even more so the new District 22. We are an agricultural district. If you look at our district, we have 2 ethanol plants, 2 sale barns, hundreds of thousands of cattle that are raised. We have numerous colonies, I want to say 7 or 8 colonies in District 22 that raise millions of turkeys that help operate the plant in Huron, which is very important to Huron. Most of the bills we've had over the last few years in the agriculture and natural resources have been hunting bills. But we have had a direct influence on a lot of the things that are happening with agriculture in South Dakota. In my 6 years, we've been part of the decision-making and the promotion of the new Animal Diagnostic Lab and Research Lab at South Dakota State University, something that's very important for the future of South Dakota's animal industry. In my 2nd term, we passed the Precision Ag building, which is built on South Dakota State University as well. And that is the program that my eldest son graduated from, is Precision Ag. That is the future of South Dakota agriculture. It's important to have a voice on that committee. It really doesn't hurt to have 2. Bob Glanzer was previous to Lynn Schneider. We've always had 2 seats on that Ag and Natural Resources Committee. Very, very important. And when we came along this 3rd term, that's when the DEX building came up for the South Dakota State Fairgrounds. The appropriators denied funding of the DEX building. it was up to Representative Schneider and I to build consensus and build support to get that passed through the legislature on a 2/3 vote. It's very important to have two members on the Ag and Natural Resources. This district is vitally served, or essentially served, and is lucky to have two members on that same committee. So that's why we have two.
Go ahead, Lynn.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure I can add very much to Roger's background, just describing for you the value of us both being on the Ag, House, and Natural Resource Committee. I covered it very well. I'm going to jump to one about what bills that we passed. First, Roger didn't bring that up, but he was very interested in, very instrumental in the housing and infrastructure bill, where we've been talking for such a housing crunch in our state for the last couple of years, and that took an awful lot of legwork to get across the finish line, and so very fortunate for Roger to be able to accomplish that, because that'll help our district a lot as well. And then I was going to comment on the what bills have I passed, and the answer in my first 2 years is 0. One of the things that I liked about my brother-in-law, Bob Glanzer's thought when he came to Pierre. He said, I'm not so sure, but that maybe I was sent to Pierre to stop more laws from being passed. We maybe have more laws than we need already. And so being my first year to learn and be out there, I wasn't anxious to try to see how many bills I could introduce. We have some legislators who just run a flurry of them. And others who are very targeted. So I hope that's where I'll be going forward, is very targeted bills that are really useful to District 22 and well as the whole state. Thank you.
Shane, in fairness, I want to give you some equal time if you'd like to respond. What committees have you thought about you'd like to serve on, something like that? Well, that's your choice, if you would like to respond.
Yeah, I believe I would love to serve on the Education Committee. I think there's a lot of opportunity in that committee. I believe education is kind of a hot topic right now in our state, and it's a topic that I'm very, very passionate about. I have 4 children within the public school system. So I would love to serve on that committee and help kind of steer the topic when it comes to social studies standards in our state. I believe that critical race theory is not being taught in our schools. Like I said, I have 4 children in the public school system. Very, very involved with their education. I know what they're doing, and I've not seen it once. Not seen it once. So I think some of the things that are being done right now with those standards are a bit extreme, and I think we need to rely more on our teachers to focus those standards. Thank you.
Thank you. We will take another question. Do we have another question from the audience? Yes, please come to the podium.
I'm Sister Teresa Ann Wolf from Watertown, South Dakota, and you know I have no business asking anything because I'm not from this district. But if you'll have patience with me or allow me to just ask something. Shane, I was intrigued and interested when you said that you were teaching ESL classes. I know from my previous position as the director of the Benedictine Multicultural Center that Huron has made great progress in welcoming immigrants and helping them integrate. This is very important for our state and well for every district, for you also. And I think that issue of immigration is becoming more and more crucial, especially as we think of the employment and the lack of workers in South Dakota. If you are elected, Shane, what would you do to continue to welcome immigrants and help them become integrated into the state?
Yeah.
Thank you, sister.
Yeah, I loved teaching ESL. I would say it's probably one of one of the favorite opportunities that I've gotten to do in my life. The Corinne people are hardworking. I mean, the ESL classes that I taught, they weren't required. You didn't have to come, right? They worked all day, and they show up to learn English, right? They showed up to learn so that they could integrate within our culture. And so I have no problem being an advocate to bringing to welcoming those people within our community. I believe when you look at Huron, that they played a crucial impact within our workforce. I think there was a time in Huron where we were struggling. Right? We couldn't find people to work. We couldn't find opportunities, and the Corinne people came here. They found jobs, and they've integrated within our community. Right? Opening up businesses. It's boosted our economy. So yes, I'm in favor of bringing more immigrants to Huron to help boost our economy and to integrate. Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead, Lynn.
Yes, thank you. Great question. What comes to my mind is how to continue and build on what the success we've had so far. I mean, I look around and the support from the local development corporation, the chamber, the business community, certainly our public school system under retired now Terry Nebelsick's leadership and Dr. Steinhoff's receiving the handoff. I think we're in great shape to continue that momentum because, to the point you made, our labor supply is still tight, and this is a source to find more workers that we can assimilate into the community. And I think, the turkey plant's been open now since 2005. Hard to believe. I mean, that's over 15 years. It's coming up on 20. And before that, of course, with Jack Links, with Alpina, and a lot of minority workers work there too. And so we've had a good number of years to get better and better at doing this job as solidly and with as much excellence as we can. And so I'm glad to see that the momentum keeps building in the right direction. I mean, it's quite a interesting statistic for Huron that over half of our student enrollment in public schools is what's called minority. So that's my goal, is that we can keep that up. And one of the big things that happened in the legislature years back with our prior now term limited Senator Jim White was when the ESL was getting to be a real need in these schools and the rest of the state hadn't quite gotten there yet. He took the lead to try to convince the legislature some of the funding that needed to happen to keep financial pressure off the local school districts that had that need. Soon Aberdeen was one of those, and then even Sioux Falls, and then it became easier to get that through. So thanks to Senator White for his leadership.
Well, thank you for the questions. And coming from Watertown, if you travel around Huron, you'll see the ever-changing faces of our community. And it's been an important improvement and essential need for us to have in our community, to have the immigrant workforce from Myanmar, Burmese, Puerto Rico, all of the Hispanics. We rely on individuals that are non-English speaking, and our community has embraced those individuals and really done a nice job of integrating them into the school system and integrating them into our community. And I'm proud to be a member of Huron because of that fact, that we were the leaders on trying to bring these people to the community and really doing a nice thing and having them help us with our employment situation. And Representative Schneider talked about the fact that we've got two previous legislators here that worked on that ESL bill, and we were the leaders to bring that to fruition throughout South Dakota. And that was very important for our community and all communities throughout South Dakota at this point.
Thank you.
I know this isn't a debate, Peggy Gibson again, but that ESL bill was my standalone bill that Senator White helped with.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Please come forward.
I'm Dolores Brown, and I'm quite concerned about the lack of information that comes out of the state legislature, especially concerning Noam's travel expenses. She campaigned on being transparent, but yet we're not even finding out how our taxes are being spent. I think they tried to pass a law even in the legislature, I might be mistaken, to keep these things private. If that did happen, how did you vote on it? And I'm not sure that happened, but I sort of think I heard that. But how do you feel about the lack of transparency in our state government?
Okay, who would like, go ahead.
Again, thank you for the question, Dolores. I'd be happy to see a complete log of all those travel expenses, just like you. Maybe Representative Chase knows better than I do, but I'm not aware of a law that the legislature passed to keep the lid on that type of information. There are a fair amount of, I don't know what I want to say, freedoms isn't maybe quite the right word, but the flexibility that the executive branch has to manage some of their information. But in a broader sense, as you follow that more and more, you will see that there can tend to be a difference of opinion between the legislative branch and the executive branch on various things. And yeah, we do have a reason that we have these three branches of government separate but equal. And so some of that is to have a check and balance on each other. But I can't speak specifically to that question other than I'd be pleased to see a full disclosure too. But I don't know what it'll take to have a legislature make that accomplished. Maybe Representative Chase can enlighten us a little better than I can.
Yeah,
Let's give Shane an opportunity.
Yeah, I would be in favor of full transparency. The fact is, it's your money, right? It's your money, and so being able to see where it's being spent, seeing those travel logs, I think it's a good thing. I think if something, inappropriate happened, it should be uncovered, and so yeah, I'd be in full favor, and I would support any kind of bill that would show complete transparency. Thank you.
Roger?
Yes, I'll respond to it. There was a bill that was brought by Taffy Howard, I think it was 2 years ago, talking about the records and the reporting of the expenses from the governor's office. Went to State Affairs and it was killed in State Affairs. We never had a chance to vote on it in the legislature. It was killed before it got to the House floor for a vote. So that was, I think it was 2 years ago when that happened. As far as transparency, folks, if it's an issue with the governor's office, it's an issue with the governor's office. As far as your state legislators, I don't know that we can be any more transparent than what we are. We come to these forums, and thank you to the Governmental Affairs Committee for at least 3 times out of the year during January, February, we have these meetings to where you can come and address us and visit with us. My email is always open and available, and you can email, you can call. We are available. We are legislators that are right here in your community. You can walk into my office and visit with me at any time, or you can give me a call anytime. I'll be happy to visit with you. But as far as us being able to mandate everything that the governor does, we don't have that ability. And so we want to be open to you, and anytime that we can have you come and visit with us and ask questions during the legislative session, we're more than happy to do that.
Thank you. I kind of wish the Government Accountability Board would tell what little slap on the hand Kristi Noem got when they decided she was guilty too. Do you guys have any control over that? I mean, they're keeping that secret too.
No, evidently there was a settlement reached and it's sealed, and so we'll probably never know.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Do we have another question from the audience? We did ask the 3 participants for some suggestions for questions, and I'm going to, at this time, take the liberty to ask one of those. Do you support or oppose Amendment D? Constitutional Amendment D will be on the ballot. We'll hear about it later, but we would be interested in legislative candidates' perspective on Constitutional Amendment D.
I can take,
Go ahead.
well, thank you. Amendment D is the item that would expand Medicaid expansion in our state, which has been looked at numerous times, and we're one of a minority of states that have not expanded it. And probably my major concern at this point is that this is being asked to be put into the state constitution. And I frankly don't feel like that's the right place for it. I think it would have been better to be an initiated measure. But, so I'm mostly waiting to see how the voters turn out on it. And if it passes, then obviously there's no question it's there to stay in our Constitution, probably in perpetuity until we change the Constitution on that part. There's a lot of information about the actual cost and how much that's going to be, and when does it start hitting the state's budget. And I need to get more of that information boiled down to get it clear in my own mind, just to know better how much that is. There's been numbers like 80 million bantered around, and that maybe, well, that wouldn't hit for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and then maybe the first couple of years we wouldn't even notice an increase in the cost. But sooner or later, there will be some additional costs to deal with, and so we would have to figure that out.
Good.
All right, Constitutional Amendment D. The thing that concerns me about it is we really don't know the true numbers. And I will agree with Representative Schneider, I don't like it added to the state constitution. Each time we get sworn in as legislators, we swear to abide by the Constitution of the state of South Dakota. And our Constitution has lasted a long time, and I don't know that I really feel that this should be added to the Constitution. We as legislators have to look at not only what's important for today, but we have to have a long-range looking forecast out into the future, folks. Medicaid expansion could cost the state of South Dakota a lot of dollars. At some point, the federal dollars could and should stop funneling money to states. And then we're going to have to stand on our own issues. And so, for that reason, I'm concerned about it. I'm not going to issue a positive or a negative against the vote, but I look forward to the experts that are going to talk about this issue a little bit later on.
Shane?
I'm in favor of this expansion. We're going to get $300 million from DC to provide health insurance to over 40,000 hardworking South Dakotans, right? I mean, there are people right now who live in our state who have to ask the question, can I buy health care? Can I afford these things, or should I buy food for my family? And if you've ever been in that situation, what are you going to do? You're going to buy food for your family, right? You're going to ignore the health care costs, and you're going to focus on surviving right now. Long term, I don't think it's healthy for our state. I think it can negatively affect our workforce if there's 40,000 South Dakotans who are struggling with their health. 39 states have expanded Medicaid. 39. Not one of them had any issue getting to net zero and funding the program. Not one. So for those reasons, I'm in favor of it.
Thank you. Do we have a question from the audience? Yes, come forward, please.
Benjamin Chase from your local paper. The governor announced a tax plan this week, or a tax reduction elimination plan this week regarding grocery tax. That has been proposed actually previously in the legislature by her opponent, where he has proposed to do a similar action and it has been defeated. And my curiosity is, how is that going to be funded to where it would be a viable option going forward now under her proposal, whereas it wasn't under his proposal previously? Why is it a better idea now, and how is that going to be something we can afford to do as a state now that we couldn't do when it was proposed previously?
Thank you. I'm going to give Shane an opportunity to start here.
I'm in favor of this, of of cutting this tax on the food. Like I said, I think there are a lot of people in our state who are struggling, and I think this is going to give them a break. Anytime we can give an average South Dakotan a break, I think it's a good thing. I love what Jamie Smith said last night, that he believes that the marijuana measure will pass in our state, and if that does pass, we're going to bring in some tax dollars from that, and I believe that will help cover the shortage of not having a tax on food.
Which of you two would like to begin?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yep, thank you. Just kind of first off the cuff, I favor it. However, there'll be a lot of examination of that. Can we really do the full 4.5%, which is in the neighborhood of $100 million plus? Will something get scaled back a little bit, or will it get shot down altogether? I don't know. I mean, I think there's quite a diversity of opinion probably in the legislature of that, but generally, the argument from a sales tax on food has always been, well, that's a regressive tax, meaning this is the biggest burden by the group of our citizens that are in the least position to be able to afford to pay it. Well, then an offset argument is, oh, but a lot of those people are qualifying for food stamps, and this sales tax doesn't apply to food stamps. Well, I hadn't thought too much about that until recently, but that maybe carries some weight. But if you come back to the $100 million piece and you look at our total state operating budget, it's right in the $2 billion area. So as far as how we're going to fund this represents in the neighborhood of 5% of our operating budget. Not all those extra federal one-time dollars that we got in the last couple of years, and a couple of them that still came in this year. However, the state just finished its fiscal year this past summer, June 30th, with somewhere around $110, $115 million surplus. So the argument is that our economy has been healthy enough and growing enough that it's getting to a new level, hopefully, of sustainability. Trouble with that position is, but this inflation problem isn't behind us yet. And where are the interest rates going to go with the federal open market committee's plan to finally get it cut off? Will there be a big enough recession and we really do start losing jobs? So that's kind of an open-ended question. That would be why, although I'd favor trying to get the 4.5% through on sales tax, there's just some caveats. By the time we get all the answers to those things, I'd sure like to see some relief.
Go ahead, Roger.
I could talk on this one for a long time, but that's been a bill that's been tossed around the legislature each year of the 6 years that I've been there. And I voted against it whenever we did have the chance to vote against it. Now, folks, I get it. People are struggling. Food is expensive, and everything's expensive. And Representative Schneider just talked about what we had as far as an excessive fund for the last fiscal year. I'm looking at the email that we got from Jeff Melhoff, who is the one that really follows the budget. And this is as of September 7th. For the first 2 months of this fiscal year, we are $32 million ahead of schedule of where we projected that we would be in this year's fiscal year. And I'll just read the next line. Ongoing general fund receipts are showing an 8.8% year-to-date growth compared to this time last year. Folks, we just heard an inflation study here just a week ago. What was that percentage? 8.3. Our receipts are up 8.8. We are following the rate of inflation as far as what our revenues are increasing. Everything's more expensive. And I understand food is a big struggle for people. And taking a 4.5% off on sales tax sounds like an easy, logical thing to do. But folks, it's a major part of our state budget. And like I said, we have to be prudent and really look out for what's best for the state of South Dakota. There will likely come a time when our budget, our receipts are not what they are right now. And we're going to have to take a hard look. If we continue to take income out and our expenses stay the same, that could be a problem down the road. This announcement was made now because they are at beginning stages of starting the next year's budget. So all state agencies have to report in what they expect to have for expenses and what they're gonna need for revenue, or what their projected revenue is. The governor came out at this time, it wasn't a political statement, she came out now as they are projecting and putting together her next year's budget, informing them that this next year's budget could be $100 million less based on sales tax reduction on food. Now, I would like to see prices come down. We don't have any control over that. But my concern is if we reduce and eliminate the tax altogether, it's awfully tough to bring that tax back to provide funding in years to come. I think it's important that we look at the whole budget to see how it reflects on providers, state employees, and most importantly on education in the future. We need money as a state to fund everything that we are obligated to fund. It's important that we have that funding available. Rather than eliminating it all the way, perhaps we reduce it down to 2.5%. See how we function for a year. And if we can function and get rid of it altogether, then we take it away at that time. Taking things out in stages is much better than just dropping it all together at one time.
Thank you. We would have time for one more question. Do we have a question from the audience? Okay, from my list submitted by the candidates here, we talked about one ballot measure. Let's talk about the other one. Initiated Measure 27. How do you feel about Initiated Measure 27? Who would like to start? Go ahead, Shane.
I'm in favor of it, mostly because I don't understand why we're doing this over again. The people have voted on this already. The majority of South Dakotans are in favor of this. All right? This is an example of elected officials ignoring your will, ignoring what you want. So I believe it will pass, and if you elect me, I'm going to fight to make sure that it's law.
Thank you. Go ahead, Lynn.
Thank you. Well, my position has been, I'm not in favor of recreational marijuana. And I said that before, and I said that if it does pass, I'd do what I could to respect the will of the people and get it implemented with the kind of safety nets and whatever we need and all that sort of thing. So we'll see where it turns out on November 8th. But having said that, what it brings to my mind is two of the summer committees that the legislature had this year I was privileged to serve on. One was, they both involved jails, prisons. Oh, well, does that relate to recreational marijuana or not? It was amazing to be in these studies. We've met one committee 4 times, the other one 3 times. There's kind of 2 different deals here. We have the regional and county jails and their issues, like Beetle County Correction Center right here, and then we have the state prison population. It costs the state over $90 million a year just to operate the state prison system with some 3,000 males and 500 females, and the women's prison in Pierre that is in dire need of relief there because they're way, way, way overcrowded. Hopefully we'll get through the legislature to take care of that next year. But all of this stuff, what they said was the vast majority of the people that are in our jails, county, and even a lot of the prison positions are kind of a function of 3 things. Either drugs, either alcohol, or domestic violence. And the drugs kind of relates back to marijuana. And there's a recidivism rate, or the odds that you're going to wind back up in jail because you quote, didn't learn your lesson or you didn't get rehab sufficiently is another somewhere in the neighborhood of 45% of our prison population. And that stuff's going in the wrong trend line right now. And it's like, so what are we able to do to kind of level that off? So yeah, we get recreational marijuana, and yeah, we get new revenue sources from that, but are we going to have more of those kinds of costs that face us? And we got to figure out how to deal with them. So that's why my vote won't be in favor of it.
Roger?
Well, we go back to last year's legislature. House Bill 1045 would have set parameters of what the legislature would like to see as far as implementation, taxation of legalized marijuana if it passes this ballot measure this election cycle. Senate Bill 3, I would have voted for as well. I was in favor of House Bill 1045 because it would have given the legislature and the state some pretty sound guidelines to move forward with legalizing recreational marijuana. Senate Bill 3 was very similar. We didn't get a chance to vote on that. We didn't have enough votes on the floor to smoke it out and bring it to a House floor vote. I've always been opposed to marijuana. It was very tough for me to even spend the time and discussion in the last legislative sessions about marijuana. Marijuana is a recreational drug that leads to harder and more violent drugs in the future. And I never used marijuana, never saw the need to. I have 3 grandkids. I don't want them to grow up in a world exposed to marijuana at will. And God help us if we legalize marijuana and we expect the revenue off of marijuana sales to pick up for the loss of grocery bills, grocery sales tax. That would be the ultimate slap in the face as far as I'm concerned for us as a society, to expect marijuana revenue to pick up for lost food revenue. The expenses of recreational marijuana passage would far outweigh any revenue that we would get as far as jails and loss of productive time for members of society. So I guess I'm going to be a no vote on that particular initiative.
Thank you. We have come to our time limit for this session. We're going to go to closing statements in reverse order of how we opened, and we'll begin with Mr. Lynn Schneider. Lynn?
Okay, well, thank you, Mike. And thanks again to all of you for coming out today. It's important to have our citizens pay attention to what goes on in government and in state government, and particularly in our case, the House of Representatives. So I appreciate your interest. It's been a privilege for me to serve a full 2 years in this first term and represent you. And I would just ask for your vote to give me a chance to continue that. There are unfinished items out there, like I just mentioned on the jail stuff. We could have spent the whole hour just scratch the surface on that one, and many other things as well. So thank you again for coming, and I appreciate the privilege.
Thank you. Mr. Roger Chase.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you to the Governmental Affairs Committee for having us today. This is the way that you learn about the candidates and the differences that and how we all face our role as legislators in Pierre. I've been involved with the legislature for 6 years. If I'm reelected, I'll be term limited, so I'm looking for that last 2 years, the opportunity to be able to represent you. It's important to have continuance in the legislature, to have that experience, and for legislators to be able to go to Pierre and hit the ground running and be your elected officials. I've always viewed myself as being that common sense, logical person in Pierre that basically lies in with what you guys believe in and how you live your lives and what I can do to be your representative in Pierre. It's a very important role, and it's not something that we just do for fun. We look at what's viable and what's important for the state, not only now, but for years and years to come. My interest is in agriculture and business. I have that experience. I can bring that to the table in Pierre and be your representative. I would like to have that opportunity to get my 4th and final term and serve you in the South Dakota House of Representatives.
Thank you. Mr. Shane Milne.
Thank you again for being here. It's been a great time answering your questions, and thank you, Roger and Lynn, for being here today too. I know we may have some difference of opinions, but the one thing I can respect is that you've taken time out of your personal life and your business to serve the people. So thank you for that. My main priority is to protect the voice of the people. That's why I'm running. I believe that the voice of the people is at risk because one party has held the power for too long. Every time a ballot measure is voted on, it's ignored. It's ignored by our elected officials. And I want to make sure that your voice is heard and protected, but I also want to protect the opportunities that this community has given me. I want to make sure that those opportunities continue to happen for everyone who comes and lives within our district. This community has given me a home. It's given me a wonderful career. It's given my wife a wonderful career. It's provided an education for my children, especially my oldest son, Jude. He has autism. And so before we moved here 6 years ago, the town was very small and there were no services. And as we moved here, actually Roger's wife, Michelle Chase, was his teacher. She recognized that Jude needed more. And so she fought for him, got him in the services he needed, and he's grown so much. And so because this community has given me so much, I want to ensure that you have those same opportunities going forward. So I want to protect your voice and ensure that you get the same opportunities that I've gotten. Thank you again.
Thank you. Let's show our appreciation to the three candidates. Stick around. We'll take a couple minutes here to reset. I would invite the proponent and opponent for Constitutional Amendment, Constitutional Amendment D, the Medicaid expansion, to come forward, and we will begin in just a few minutes. If we could come back to order. We will spend the next 25 minutes on Constitutional Amendment D, the expansion of Medicaid. Similar format. We will take opening comments from both sides, and then we'll take your questions from the audience. And again, if you'd rather write your question down, please raise your hand. Dr. Steinhoff will get you a card and you can write your question down. We're pleased to have with us this morning Tom Dean as the proponent for Constitutional Amendment D and Lisa Nolan as the opponent. And we are ready to begin. We'll begin with 3 minutes of opening statement from each, beginning with Mr. Dean. Tom?
They told us it'd be 5. What? They told us it would be 5.
Go ahead. I may have told them that, sorry.
Okay. Otherwise, is that what you were told? Okay, we will take 5 minutes of opening comment. If that's what you were told, you need to get your microphone on.
I don't know, is this on?
No,
You gotta push the button there.
There, oh, there's the green
put
light.
it towards your mouth a little more. Pull it towards you.
How's that?
That sounds good, thank you.
Okay, okay. Actually, before I start, I'd like to introduce Sister Teresa Ann, who spoke a minute ago, who will also be available to answer questions. So, yes, I'm Tom Dean. I'm a physician, retired physician from Washington Springs. What are we talking about? What is Amendment D? And actually, it's a move to extend Medicaid coverage to those folks who don't qualify under the current structure. And I believe that passage of Amendment D will actually benefit all South Dakotans, not just the recipients. And currently, Medicaid, for those of you that are not familiar with it, some people believe that Medicaid is a program that anybody that's poor can get Medicaid, and that's just not true. It's a categorical program that covers health care costs for pregnant women, kids, and the disabled, and low-income elderly who are in nursing homes. But that leaves a huge gap of people whose income is too low to buy health insurance on their own, and who work for employers who, for the most part, can't afford to provide health insurance for their families, or for their employees, I mean. How did we get here? The history of this, Medicaid is an old program. It started in the 60s, but was revised about 10 years ago when Obamacare, the AC Affordable Care Act, was passed. And initially, the plan was that the Affordable Care Act would provide subsidized private insurance for folks in the middle income range, and that Medicaid would cover all the rest, the people below 138%, I believe it is, of poverty. And that would make sure that everyone in the country had access to health care. The Supreme Court stepped in and said Congress went beyond their authority, and they could not force states to do this if they chose not to, so then it was left up to the states. And since then, 38 states have approved expansion of Medicaid so that everyone, regardless of disability or whatever, would be eligible for Medicaid coverage. And the net effect of this, South Dakota has chosen up for the last, 10 years or whatever since it started, to not expand Medicaid. And the net effect is that our tax dollars are going to subsidize expansion of Medicaid in California and New York and a whole variety of these other 38 states that have expanded Medicaid. So Amendment D is actually a way to preserve those dollars in South Dakota to cover the working poor who are simply not able to afford health insurance. Now, the opponents say that, well, if they're able-bodied, they should get a job and they should get their own health insurance. And, you know, I think all of us have some sympathy to that. However, the reality is that given the cost of private health insurance these days and the incomes that these folks have, private insurance just simply is not an option. The Amendment D would, as I've said, provide coverage for everyone under 138% of the poverty level. The question is, well, who's going to pay for this? And the Medicaid has always been a joint project with the shared costs between the federal government and the states. This new division or Medicaid approach, actually the federal government would provide 95% of the cost for the first 2 years, and the states would provide 5%. Beyond that, the match goes to 90 and 10%. But still, the federal government will provide the vast majority of the cost. So what happens now when we don't have these coverages in place? Uninsured folks tend to put off their health care. They tend to get sicker and are cared for later, and they have poorer outcomes and higher costs, and those costs get passed on to the rest of us through the hospital costs and into our private insurance. What about people that, the so-called freeloaders? In fact, they have, I guess I'm run out of time. The bottom line, I would say, is that this expansion of this program, basically everybody benefits. It helps to stabilize costs and benefits for hospitals and other healthcare providers who right now are quite squeezed. I can get into that a little later if we have time. It helps, communities are healthier and more productive, and that's been documented in the states that have expanded Medicare, that they're Medicaid, I mean. And finally, there's more money circulating in these communities, and they've shown in states that have expanded Medicaid that there is economic growth and economic benefits for the whole communities when this is done. So I'll stop there. My bottom line is the basic problem we have is that healthcare in this country costs too much. And I can go on for quite a long time about that. But
Thank you, Dr. Dean. And now we will hear from the opponent to Constitutional Amendment D, Lisa Nolan. Lisa?
Thank you very much. Lisa Nolan with Americans for Prosperity. Americans for Prosperity, we exist in South Dakota. On the grassroots advocacy side, we're a nonpartisan organization, and we're here today to educate and just be another perspective on Medicaid expansion. So as we talk with voters and talk with groups around the state, we just want to provide more education on the topic. And actually would love to start with where you left off, I think, or where Tom left off, that healthcare costs too much in the state. Healthcare, this is a crisis where people are having trouble affording care for themselves and their families. And so what we would look at is we all agree that that's a problem and that people deserve greater access to quality care that's affordable. And so what we would look at is solutions that we see that compete with Medicaid in terms of taking care of folks in South Dakota. And we can talk more about that if that question comes up. I'd be happy to. But focusing on Medicaid, we just wouldn't see the expansion of another government program as the solution to the problem. There's a few reasons for that. As you're going to the polls, or as voters are going to the polls, we're having them ask themselves 3 questions, or I would recommend you ask yourselves 3 questions. The first question is, do you want to help people get back to work, or do you want them to be sidelined by more government dependency? And the idea that there are hardworking people that are incentivized not to go back is an important thing for us to consider. When we're putting able-bodied individuals on Medicaid, what they have found in other states is a 3% decline in studies that they have done in overall employment. What we want to do is look at that in South Dakota and say that timing couldn't be worse for us right now as we're facing a worker shortage. We've seen that go at 29,000 over 6 months between October and April. The fact is, if we were to increase the labor shortage by expanding Medicaid, we would find ourselves and our citizens with lower incomes, with increased taxes, and with increased inflation. We'd like to provide options outside of that. The second question is, do you want to remove 17,000 people from their private health plans and shift them onto Medicaid? So previously, before COVID, there are plans available on the exchange up to 400%, and there was a coverage gap in there that people want to address with Medicaid expansion. What's actually happened over recent legislation is that the federal government is subsidizing private silver-level healthcare plans for those that are in that coverage gap, and they pay little to nothing for these private plans right now. This is only available to states that haven't expanded Medicaid. They've actually honestly made it so that in terms of providing coverage for low-income individuals through Medicaid or through federal subsidies, we are in a better state as a non-expansion state than as an expansion state. And we would only see that continue to extend because we've already seen it in the Inflation Reduction Act. This was extended recently. So we would continue to see that. But even if someone were in support of Medicaid expansion, the timing couldn't be worse in terms of moving somebody off their private plans that they have right now. And then the third question I would ask you to ask yourself is, do you want to prioritize care for able-bodied working age individuals, or do you want to prioritize care for the elderly and for children, for pregnant mothers, and those that are disabled? And what we've seen in other states is there has been an adverse impact in terms of the access to care that people are getting when that's expanded, because you have providers that you're competing with now, an additional 44,000 people across the state. And for those reasons, those questions are things you'll have to answer for yourself, but that's some information. I'd be happy to answer more questions on the Q&A. And then also, thank you, just remembering too that like I said, there are good solutions out there that we've seen states do. People are capable of incredible things. And we've seen expanded telehealth, and we've seen expanded scope of practice that have provided that good care to people. I appreciate being here, and I appreciate your questions. I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. We are ready for some questions from the audience. Who would like to ask the first question? Don't be shy. Anybody?
I'm horrible at public speaking, so I'll just say that up front. I'm very passionate about nursing and healthcare. I'm currently a small business owner in Huron. We have, my business partner and I have a lot of different areas in which we serve the public. Have you ever asked yourself in your stance, Lisa, that you're limiting the access to healthcare by excluding these people that are able or working body? If you have to think about how you get on the Affordable Health Care Act, myself, yeah, I had to do it, whatever, it was the most affordable thing for my family. But it's those people who can't have the access to health care that's costing our money, that's closing down our facilities, that's not paying nurses what they need to be paid for. Have you ever had to look at somebody and know that the insulin costs $400, but their rent costs $400, and there's no food into anything? But if we had expanded Medicaid, they'd be able to have that insulin and go to work every day. But what happens? They can't get the insulin, now they're in the ER. Now we're losing money because the hospital can't afford to cover costs on non-insured, but we still don't turn people away in healthcare. When you made your comments, I'm like shaking because I can't believe that we would isolate one group of people for another. If you look at our numbers, like in here, and I'm not great on numbers, trust me, but it's really sad when, you know, you look at it that a majority of us don't make a lot of money. I mean, I'm fortunate in that I'm independent and that I have great opportunities. But if you're saying that those 40,000 people are gonna knock somebody off of health insurance, that's not true.
I think we have the gist of your question. We're gonna let them respond. We do not allow speeches from the podium.
I'm not trying to make
We're-
a speech, I'm
That's
just asking
fine.
her
That's
what
fi-
her
And we're
opinion
gonna,
was
we're gonna
in
allow a
that
response
statement.
from each one of them. Thank you. Go ahead.
It's
We're gonna let you
difficult
go.
to hear the young lady.
Oh, so is that better? I wondered about that, but I figured I'd get feedback, so thank you. What was your name again?
Sarah Watson.
Sarah.
I'm an RN in South Dakota in Huron.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate it. One of the things that we talk about, well, first of all, I think you did a really great job asking that question, so don't worry about that at all. But one of the things we talk about is we should be sitting down and having conversations with healthcare providers across the state, with patients across the state. There should always be a large amount of listening and studies done before you ever approach a policy issue. And that's
Right.
really important, so I appreciate hearing that. And what I hear from you is passion, and I hear that you want to care for people, and I think that's wonderful. We were talking about this right beforehand. Sometimes we just have different ways that we think are the right answers to go about that. Real quick with the 40, I was just writing down a couple things so I didn't forget while you were talking. With the 44,000 going on to Medicaid, it wouldn't be that they'd push them off of coverage. In those cases, we're saying that coverage doesn't necessarily equal care, so people would get more coverage. They would get Medicaid coverage, but that doesn't always equate to better care. There's a way to bring health care down for all South Dakotans. And so it's good that we're talking about that level of population that would be within Medicaid expansion, but we should also be looking at things that cover what you talked about. It's not just people in that poverty area, it's also across the state. People are experiencing higher health care costs. So we want to bring the cost of health care down across the board. And so that's where we have to look at actual reforms within the system, and we have to look at different policies and how we can allow more innovation in healthcare. Those are some of the solutions to some of the problems that you're talking about, and they're really important to address. It's true that Medicaid can provide coverage for some people, and that's not bad. The idea that right now, the second question there was around the people that are being kicked off, and what that means is they have access for just this period of time, as we're a non-expansion state, to certain healthcare plans on the exchange. And because it's only for non-expansion states, and they're paying little to nothing on those right now, once we expand, if we expand, then we will lose that status. We will lose those federal subsidies that are helping people pay for their healthcare costs now, or they're helping people pay for their premiums now. So that's the difference. The other areas you're talking about communities, and what I would say is the reimbursement rate for Medicaid is 2/3 of what you would see for a private insurance plan. And so if somebody is on a private insurance plan and there's a rural hospital or an area where you want to make sure that you're supporting healthcare in that area, you're actually going to get higher payments for nurses and for providers if you are on private healthcare plans than if you have people on Medicaid. And so actually in some cases they've seen that not get better for rural hospitals. So I appreciate your concern. I hope some of that addresses some of it, and I'd love to talk with you after, because
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm going to give Dr. Dean a chance to respond also.
I guess that we need to clarify things a bit, I believe. Right now, most of the people that would be covered by expansion of Medicaid are currently working. They're not freeloaders. They are currently working. The problem is that given the current cost of private health insurance for both employers and for employees, it's out of reach. And I've talked to employers in my community, they would like to do it, but they simply can't. And I guess I don't understand. My understanding is that anybody below 133 or 138% of the part does not qualify for ACA plans. They just don't qualify. So I'm not sure. Maybe there's something I don't know about. But the problem is that our healthcare provider organizations are in trouble. There's a recent report that came out that said half of U.S. hospitals are now operating in the red. And over the last few years, 140 small rural hospitals have closed. And that there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, but part of it is the uninsured and the bad debt that they have to absorb. Now, and like I said, the uninsured, when they go to the hospital, even those who are not working, even if you say they're shiftless and non-deserving. When they get sick, they go to the emergency room, and we take care of them. And so it does incur costs, even if even if they don't have coverage. They still incur costs that have to be borne by the system in one way or another.
Thank you. Do we have another question in the audience? Anybody? Sure, Mr. White.
Jim White.
Hi.
Dean, I know you, and I always respected you as a physician. Just a clarification on what your initial statement was as far as the state's percentage of the proposed Medicaid expansion. I think you said it was 5%.
Yep.
And the government was going to do 95%. And then you said the next year it goes down to 10%.
Correct.
Is it that does it stay at 10 and 90 from there on, or does it continue to decrease so that the state continues to pick up a bigger share?
Right now, the program is that for this group of people, that 90-10 split would go on. There's no proposal, there's no provision to continue to lower it. The current split between federal and state contributions, I think it's about 55-45, it's somewhere in that range. So this group of people would be treated separately and would stay on a much higher federal match.
And that's written into this verbiage of this initiative.
I believe so. I haven't read it, but that's my understanding.
But because that opens a different door, if you're going to continue to ask the state to continue to pick up a bigger and bigger portion of what the government has proposed up front, it's going to mean the state's going to have to come up with a new tax in order to cover that additional cost.
Well, the experience in the states that have expanded Medicaid, they have actually seen growth in economic activity that has more than covered that difference.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just one question.
Okay.
One further question. I know that we're only one or very few states that don't have a state income tax, and I always try to avoid that statement as far as incurring an expense that would require that. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to make a response, Lisa?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yes, so the cost, as you explained, the federal piece of it does go down over time, and there's a hesitation in assuming that the government will continue to follow through with what they've said, where we've seen in different programs that they haven't always followed through. In terms of the cost shifting to the states, that could happen at any point in time. It's not their plan as of right now. We've seen that happen in a lot of programs. I would say most don't end when they say they're going to end. And I would also say that, so they end up going on for a long time, and they end up covering more than they say in terms of people. One thing that we have found for numbers and data is that in other states, so we had 44,000 that were estimated to go on the rolls. And almost every state, they're finding that they enroll more than twice as many individuals as projected. So they're finding that they're having budgeting issues within the states because of that. So that is a valid concern in terms of how we're spending our money, in terms of the fact that we want to be sure that that we are funding public health and safety and education as well, and it would lead to some tough decisions as we spread that budget out.
One last question I would take if, come on forward, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm Barb Blagorn, a lifetime resident of South Dakota. I'm concerned about the medical care for seniors that are now residing in nursing homes. And I realize some nursing homes go in the hole every day for certain residents, and nursing homes are needing to close, which also affects the economic of that community when they lose that facility. So could you tell me how you feel that expansion would assist in that problem to keep nursing homes open?
Okay, who would like to take that question?
Actually, this provision would not affect reimbursement to nursing homes, as far as I know. That's already covered in the current Medicaid program, and it's a problem. I fully understand the Medicaid reimbursement to nursing homes does not meet nursing home costs. Both of my parents were in the nursing home in Springs for a number of years, and I figured out that our family was paying a hidden tax because we were subsidizing South Dakota Medicaid. But that's a separate issue, and as far as I know, would not be affected. It's a problem, but it wouldn't be addressed by Amendment D.
Lisa?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that and appreciate the question. That's a big concern for folks across South Dakota, especially in rural settings. And I would agree that's one of the things they have found with Medicaid is that it does not it doesn't fully fund in a way that private healthcare does. And so it's caused a lot of issues with nursing homes in South Dakota. There are a couple things you could do that we're looking at that some states have done, and great things to look forward to. But you could you could roll back some regulation. You could open up some opportunity for home-based healthcare as well. There are opportunities there. And right now, one of the problems you may have with Medicaid is that we're talking about prioritizing services. And there are waiting lists across the states. One of the problems you would find with home-based healthcare is that right now in South Dakota, this is an elective or an optional Medicaid expense that they would cover. We don't have a waiting list for that in South Dakota, so you can get home-based healthcare with no waiting time. But in states that have expanded healthcare, they're finding large, growing waiting lists for people. I believe the number right now is 700,000 people that are on waiting lists for home-based and nursing home care across the country. And we also, and that's in expansion states, we also see there were 23, I should have that number right for you, 22,000 patients have actually passed away waiting for care. So when we talk about wanting to care for people, that's a big priority. I appreciate the question on nursing homes.
Thank you. We have come to a time for summary statements from our participants. We will have 2 minutes for a summary statement, and we will begin with Dr. Dean. Tom?
Well, we appreciate you folks coming out and showing your interest in these topics. They are controversial. They're tough issues. On the issue of health care, I have always believed that if people are sick, they should be taken care of. Period. End of statement. Now, we need to figure out ways to cover that, but I don't believe the way to solve, or not solve, but to deal with the problem of the cost is simply to say, well, we're going to cover part of our population and not cover part of the rest of the population. To me, that just is not an option. And so I believe that Amendment D will extend health care coverage to a group that simply doesn't have it now, even though they're working. And even if they're not working, when they get sick, they still deserve to be cared for. And that's the issue that we're up against. So I would strongly urge you to support Amendment D. It will involve no new taxes, and it will extend coverage to a lot of people who now simply don't have it. And like I say, many of them are actually working.
Thank you. Lisa Nolan.
Yes, thank you. I want to start off real quick just helping on the issue of the 100 to 138%. That was the coverage gap that was existing, and that's why they put these federally subsidized options through. So just like I said, recent legislation within the last year and the Inflation Reduction Act extended it. That does cover that 100 to 138, actually all the way up to 400%, but up to that 100 to 138, they're not having to pay the premium. So it's very easy for them to be able to use that coverage on the front end versus it being a credit on the back end. But in closing, I just want to say with some of the things that we've talked about with these thoughts in mind, first of all, I want to make sure I'm saying that South Dakotans deserve better health care, quality health care. more affordable, should be quality care, and the important thing is to have access to that care. That's what we're really talking about, is the access to that quality care, and making that, of course, affordable. So there is a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse within the Medicaid system that's kind of frozen in time right now just because of the federal government and the emergency declaration. What we would want to see is that there could be reform within Medicaid that could actually help more people within the system. The truly vulnerable that need it right now, that have access to that, we could reform that and make that better for people. We think that by voting no, voters will be able to keep that door open to workable solutions without enshrining a failing program within our Constitution, one that is not working for people across the board, when we could be working on solutions that lower the cost of health care for everybody in South Dakota, and we want to prioritize that. Everything we've talked about is really important, taking care of patients, taking care of South Dakotans, and we think that Medicaid crowds out those who truly need it. We've seen that in different states, and we want to see quality health care expanded. And like I said, I'd be happy to talk about some of those solutions, but people are doing amazing things in this area, and I really appreciate the concern and the communities in South Dakota that are showing up and taking care of their patients. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's show our appreciation to the two candidates. We will again take about 2 minutes here to switch, and we'll have a forum on Initiated Measure 27, recreational marijuana. So if we could come back to order again. It appears we have a little bit of a glitch here this morning. We had confirmation from Melissa Mental that she would be here. She lives in one of the small towns southeast of Mitchell. We have not heard different from her. Out of respect for Mr. Jim Kenyon, who traveled from Rapid City to do this presentation this morning, we are going to give him an opportunity to make his presentation and take any questions you would have. So with that, I present to you Jim Kenyon, opponent to initiate Measure 27, recreational marijuana. Jim?
Thank you. You know, first just to thank everyone for showing up, because I know this is a Saturday, and a lot of people could be out golfing or hiking or spending time shopping, doing a whole bunch of different things. So just very grateful. And really, more than anything, I'm more grateful for my city. I grew up here. This is my hometown. And I look at the parks and the cities, and the beautiful changes have happened in this city since I grew up here a long time ago. And I was really fortunate. But when I was about age 8, my dad died. And he's actually buried here outside. And after my aunt and uncle who are here will go with me, and we'll get a chance to see her, as well as both my sets of grandparents. So I'm about as here in South Dakota as you can be. And I can tell you, I got here primarily because my mom understood something. After my dad died, she understood she needed help. And she also wanted to come back to her hometown because she knew what Huron had to offer. And there were 5 of us. And she scrambled to try and figure out how to make things work. And the fortunate thing was, you know, my grandma and grandpa lived here. And just very, very blessed. But more importantly, it was the quality of the city that you have here that provided for a kid who had no dad, who came back, and this good sisters who opened a space for me to go to the little school that is no longer here, and formed and shaped me in ways that were just very, very profound. And coming back here, it's always a great thing. I look around and I see this is still a great city. And this is a great place to raise families. You've got a wonderful thing here. And I think South Dakota, generally speaking, has an extraordinary, rich, healthy kind of environment overall. And I know it's changing. I know there's a lot of challenges we're facing, and the economic questions and the employment questions and all those kinds of realities. But I think really one of the things we have to remember is what this is about. And we have to understand who's selling this. And we have to understand who has something to gain and who has something to lose. But I'm going to tell you, you've invested tremendously in your parks, in your band, in your music, in your high schools. You know, you've done an extraordinary job here to provide good health care and a great neighborhood for families to grow up. And I can tell you, every city and every state that's adopted this has found out it's a disaster. And if you don't believe me, all you have to do is do an eye test. And the whole promise of the great economic prosperity hasn't happened in any of those states. In fact, the reality is for like Colorado, for every dollar they bring in, they spend $4.5 covering mental health issues, substance abuse, car accidents, police, and law enforcement. The one thing I can tell you that the proponents of this can't tell you is that this will make your city better or your families healthier or give your kids a greater opportunity to participate and become the person that we all want to be. And I've been lucky. I've raised my own 5 kids here in South Dakota. And I'm proud of what South Dakota is about. I'm mostly proud because I know what your vision is. And it's this vision. It's a vision of young people who are capable and strong. This is Michelangelo's David. And this is an incredible statue if you ever get a chance to see it. And this is a young man who supposedly is somewhere between 15 and 18 years of age, who is shaped and formed into a strong, capable, clear-headed man with great passion and vision about what he wants and what the vision and what the challenges he faces. And literally, this is David holding the sling over his shoulder. And he looks across the way and he sees Goliath. And our kids are facing Goliaths like never before. You need to know in our state we have twice the suicide rate for our young adults and our teens. The kids that have come through COVID have been devastated. I'm a mental health provider. That's what I do. For 30 years, I've worked with the low-income families in my community. with the people who live under the bridges, with the kids who drop out of school and parents are desperately trying to figure out how to get them in, doing psych assessment for kids who have become psychotic because quite clearly this drug will not make them healthier, it will not make them better, and it will not create the prosperity that some might reward from. That's what we think. That's our vision in South Dakota. That's what we want our young men, our young women of every race and every community in our state to look like, confident and capable. And that great quote is one by Frederick Douglass. It's much easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. I spend my career working with broken men and women across in Rapid City, South Dakota. The kids at JSC. I know how they get there. This is not a secret. It's very clear. This is Vision 2. Option 2 for our future of our kids is Dopey. And Dopey comes with a lot of fairy tales. And he sells them very, very effectively. But every drug pusher sells the same thing. I'm just going to tell you a little story about what I learned from my mom about drugs and alcohol, particularly drugs. But you have to know I'm not a prohibitionist. People try and frame me that way. Listen, I'm a Catholic, and anyone knows the joke about Catholics, right? Wherever 2 or more Catholics are gathered, there's probably a 5th. Right? We know that. And if you come to my house, I guarantee you're going to get offered a beer, whatever. That is not true. That is such a pack of lies. The question I would ask of you, are you for legalizing meth? And if you're not, does that make you a prohibitionist? The question isn't should society draw a line. It's where should we draw that line? And you have to understand who the proponents are. That's a drug pusher there. That's a drug pusher there. And drug pushers promise the same thing to every person, and they've done it their entire, since the beginning of society. And that is, I'm going to make you happy, I'm going to make you free. Don't buy that lie. They spent $1.6 million selling that across our state to confuse our voters. When people suggest this is the will of the people, no. 2006, we turned this down resoundingly. 2010, we turned it down overwhelmingly. 2020, they spent millions misinforming and miseducating. I'm here as a citizen. I'm just like you, a mom, a dad, a grandma, and grandpa, and I'm scrambling to my feet to try and protect my kids, our families, and our communities. This is a vacation day. Because you want to know what? I know what they're going to sell. And they're going to tell you that this is going to make you healthy. When has the sale of an illegal drug made anyone healthy? They're going to tell you that it's just pot. That pot is not the ditchweed that was around when I was in the 1970s growing up in Huron. That is 1.2% or 1 to 3% THC levels. The current pot that you'll find in Denver on average is 15. And that ugly colored mustard stuff, that's a concentrated form. And under this bill, this initiative measure, they'll allow this to be sold, and it's 99% pure. This is the difference between a kid drinking a beer and kid drinking a glass of Everclear. The damaging impact that this will have on our kids, our communities, and our families is unbelievable. And if you don't know that, come with me to the psych ward. Come with me to the people who live under the bridges. Come with me to the people that I can't get into our psych hospital because it's overflowing. We can't even get kids in for treatment in our cities and our states. This will not make you healthier. They're also selling this little lie, that this is inevitable, that every state in the nation is going to adopt this. And the fact of the matter is the most recent poll comes out and it clearly indicates we've got a lead. But that's before they spend their $1.2 million or $1.6 million misinforming our voters again. That's what's going to happen. We've got a lead, but we need to stand up as moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, community leaders across our state to say not in our hometown. My mom did this when I grew up here. We went to Easter Mass and we were driving home, and my sister leaned forward and she said to my mom, my brother was riding with a friend. My sister said, "Mom, you need to know he's riding with a drug pusher. That kid sells drugs." And we got home and we walked in after Easter. We were going to have Easter dinner, and this gentleman was going to join us. As he walked into our house, my mom grabbed him by the tie and walked him out the front door. My mom has a voice like mine. It carries. So when she asked him, "Do you sell drugs?" and he didn't answer, she said, "You smell like pot. Do you sell drugs?" And he didn't answer. My mom said, "You need to leave." and you need to leave my children alone. She understood something very important, and I learned something very important from that moment. I remember when she turned to my brother walked in and he said to my mother, "That's real Christian of you, Mom. We just got out of church." My mother spun, and I was standing too close to my brother, and let me tell you, I took a couple steps away, because when my mom looked at me, you knew when she was serious. And she looked at my brother and she said, "Listen, tolerance of evil is not charity, and it's not a kindness, and you need not to follow this young man." That's an important message. We need to get that message back into our homes, because this is not even that ditchweed. This will have a devastating impact in our communities. We need to be clear about that. I need a handkerchief, because I'm going to tell you, the good thing about South Dakota, people tell me, "How do you think you're going to win this? It's just a bunch of you running around." We've got $200,000 I've begged and stole from everybody, including my aunt and uncle here, to try and come up with enough money to be able to do a little bit of communication to help remind us who we are and remind us what this really is. Now, the good news about South Dakota is most of us are still just a generation or two removed from a farm. And if you can give me a handkerchief, I can tell you what, I could wipe the lipstick off that pig and we'll know what that pig is. That pig stinks. And if you've been to Denver, or you've been to Portland, or you've been to Seattle, or you've been to Washington, D.C., or you've even been to Missoula, Montana, your beautiful little park down here where you're just having a nice little, looks like a farmer's market, will be having people sleeping in your streets and in your parks. And if you doubt that, just look. If you haven't visited any of those cities, you'll find out pretty quick. This is a reality. Selling drugs is going to make you happy or free. Does this woman, these are the kind of folks and I'm telling you what, these are good people. Don't misunderstand me. These are good people. I spend blood, sweat, and tears trying to figure out how to get people treatment, or trying to decide whether or not they can be released, or trying to get them back stable, or get those families out of foster care and find appropriate places for our kids, because that's all what's going to happen. But I can tell you is this is a very wonderful woman, but she isn't happy or free. Don't listen to drug pushers. They're interested in your pocket, in our community. They're not interested in our citizens. Happy and free. This is the one that I would say to you. You know, that sells in very rural communities, and they like to sell freedom, that we don't want the government to tell us what to do. Do you want the drug pushers to tell you what to do? That's who's pushing this measure. It's not the government. It's pot pushers. They're going to spend $2 million selling this again. This is what happens to brains that use this drug. The image on the right is a showing of the electrical activity of the brain on a 28-year-old young man who uses marijuana regularly. That's a healthy brain on the left. And people will tell me, "Oh, no, you don't know that." The only thing I know is I don't argue with the Harvard Medical School. These are actually brain scans and brain images. This damages brains. It creates psychosis. It contributes to suicide, and it also contributes to long-term chronic psychosis and a decrease in mental capacity, and particularly for our young people. And they'll tell you they're not interested in our kids. And I'm only going to tell you, this slide will tell you all you need to know about that. This slide, all those states in red have the highest use rates among teens on the far left. South Dakota is ranked currently, our young people between 12 and 17, about 5.1% of them use, and this will more than double the use rate of our kids. Every state that's adopted this are all in red. The two green states are completely surrounded by states that have approved recreational marijuana. When they tell you they aren't after their kids, let me tell you, how can they be this effective? Because if you could see the slide, if you look at our young adults in the state of South Dakota, there's not one thing you could do in the next year that will double the youth rate of your kids and your young adults between 18 and 25 other than pass this initiated measure. And when they tell you they aren't interested in selling to your kids, why do their products look like this? Gummies, candies, Kush cotton. How about Pop-Tarts? I want you to think about when your grandchild gets up after visiting, doing a sleepover at a friend's house. If that stuff's sitting on the table, you know what they're going to do with it? Especially if they're 7 and 8 and can't even read. There's no warning labels. No warning labels on their products, and they're doing this intentionally. This is a picture of Colorado, and if you want to see what Colorado looks, that's tenting in Colorado.
I believe we clearly understand this gentleman's position, and I think it's time that we open up the audience for some questions and choices.
I think that's a good idea. Do you have a question for
Sure.
Mr. Kenyon?
Please.
I can give you a question.
Sure.
And it relates back to the problems that we have in the correctional system in this state. And people that are being locked up that shouldn't be. And I understand that there's a shortage of mental health care. I worked for the Department of Social Services for 20 years. I know what it's like to get a kid into a residential facility. I just don't believe that legalizing marijuana will have that much effect on this state. And I'm really sorry that, you know, the other person didn't get to come and be on this panel. So I guess that's.
I'm grateful for your questions. The question is, do I think that by legalizing marijuana will reduce the prison population? If you could tell me one state that has approved recreational marijuana that has reduced their prison population, and number two, if you could find one person who's in jail in the state of South Dakota for an ounce of marijuana, there isn't any. That's another sell by the pot industry. There is nobody in jail for an ounce of marijuana in the state of South Dakota. And we've already passed recreational marijuana, so it's available for people who need it medically. But the reality is there's nobody in jail. We don't lock people up. And actually charging people helps us get them into treatment. So the 11-year-old little girl that I worked with, whose grandmother called the police station time after time as her daughter left and sold herself in pot houses, in drug houses, to get access to drugs. The fact that we charged her 4 times with consumption of marijuana helped us get her into treatment. The police officers are not our enemy on this issue. The police officers actually help us get people treatment. I don't want to lock people up either. I spent 30 years begging people to give me money to help treat people that are addicts. I don't think jails are our answer either. We need treatment.
I can't argue with you because I don't know about how many 1-ounce people go to county jail.
Ask your sheriffs.
But,
None. 90% of them are with us on this issue.
But I kind of think that some of them do, but I can't.
Yeah, no, you can ask, you can find that out from the state of South Dakota. No one.
Okay, we're not going to have a debate between you two. I'm going to ask if anybody else has a question for Mr. Kenyon. I would welcome that. Again, I apologize. We had communication from our proponent and no word this morning about anything, so that's not controllable. Okay, Jim, I'm just going to ask you to take a couple minutes to wrap up, and then you can visit individually with people if that's fair.
That's
Okay,
great.
thank you.
I have a question.
Oh, okay.
Can I ask him to continue on with his presentation?
Yes.
You know, actually, my closing remarks, that's exactly what I'll do. This is my Uncle Dwight, by the way, who took me in, taught me to ski. You know, this is the kind of community we have. This is the kind of South Dakota we have. My aunts and uncles, grandmas and grandpas. When I got caught shoplifting in here, and you want to know what, the police took me and they did lock me behind the door and scared the heck out of me. And when my mom and dad and my aunt and uncle came to pick me up, they did the right thing. And they told me, you want to know what, this isn't the right thing to do, Jim. This isn't the right thing to do. And the police officer that actually locked me up, he ended up to be my baseball coach here in town. And he became a really wonderful man that was a great role model to me. And that's what I'm asking us all to do. There are drug pushers coming to our town. And anyone that tells you that we're going to have less drugs because of this hasn't gone to any of the states. Because I'm going to tell you, their violent crime rates go through the roof, their consumption of other drugs go through the roof, and their treatment facilities are overrun. My mom knew what to do when predators come after our kids. It's very simple, very simple. South Dakotans know how to do that. We defend our kids, our community, and we defend our families. We need to be South Dakota healthy. This is the image we have for the kids in the state of South Dakota. Right here. This young woman's name is Dignity. When I drive by that, I look and I realize, do you want to know what? This is what South Dakota does best. This young woman has got the wings. You can see she's ready to sail, can't you? She's been given a great education and a great community. and family support and teachers that invested tremendously in their best interests. This is what we want in South Dakota. And I can tell you right now, this drug will not make us better. It will not make us healthier. And the one thing I can guarantee you is, when your streets aren't safe, you aren't free. We need to keep South Dakota away from drugs and alcohol, and we need, as adults, moms and dads here, to make sure you find a way for the kids like me that need you. Because most of you will grow up in a two-parent household. A lot of us did. We got a new responsibility here in this state. And that's the vision. Please stand up and help. Please stand up and help. We're doing the best we can. And I'm going to do an 8-city tour, trying to cover as many towns as I can. Because I believe South Dakota's waking up. And I think they could look at what's happened in the states have adopted this. And it isn't good. Let's be South Dakota strong.
Thank you. Let's show our appreciation to Mr. Kenyon. Thank you for coming this morning. Appreciate your interest in what's going on in the election area in South Dakota, and have a great day.